Hello everyone, it's Jonny Khatru, and in today's video I'm talking about the new album from Coldplay, Music of the Spheres. Coldplay can be a pretty divisive band. You know, music fans often hold them up as an example of mediocrity in the ongoing decline of rock music, but I think many of us enjoy their first couple albums, at least to some extent, and I am very much a fan of their debut album, Parachutes. Although many of the singles like Clocks, Yellow, The Scientist were extremely overplayed on radio and TV, still I remember Rush of Blood to the Head impressing me with its slightly harder, slightly darker sound. How beautiful is this melody? I think it was always their simple yet effective songwriting that made Coldplay work. And as time went on, I did come to enjoy Parachutes most of all. When their third album, X and Y, came out a few years later, I was pretty excited for it. But it ended up being a pretty big disappointment for me. I was, however, much more excited by the lead single from their fourth album. The song was called Violet Hill, and it seemed like the band was getting a bit more of that darker edge back. I haven't heard this for years actually though. Of course, this album also had its extremely overplayed radio hit, which in this case was the title track, Viva la Vida, which as with their earlier singles I could probably do with not hearing it again, but it's a good song. Like many folks though, I stopped listening to Coldplay's albums in full around this time, although of course you could never get away from hearing their huge hit singles. I tuned back in though in 2017 with an EP they put out called Kaleidoscope. It's quite a bit more atmospheric and detailed than the other stuff they'd been doing at that time. So when they followed up this decent EP with an album in 2019 called Everyday Life, I was pretty hopeful, especially since it seemed the band was intending to do something a bit different. And one of the singles from that album was called Arabesque, and I adored that song. With its blaring horn sections and its incredible ending, it's something quite different from Coldplay. The album turned out to be pretty cool, a mix of experiments and more typical pop tunes. Not really up to the old standards, but at least they were trying new things. So that brings us to today, with this new album, Music of the Spheres, having a very obvious, prominent space theme. And with the second single being an epic 10-minute experience, it does seem like the band is continuing down this slightly more ambitious road. Although the first and third singles were obviously aiming for more trendy sounds, especially with the K-pop feature on My Universe. But still, I go into the album hoping for something that at least matches its grand presentation. So do me a favor and click the like button on this video, and let's get into the album. The first track is labeled with a planet emoji, but according to Wikipedia, this is in fact the title track, Music of the Spheres. I remember reading about the Pythagoras theory of the planets moving in perfect harmony, the harmony of the spheres, creating music by their perfectly designed movements. It's a lovely idea to make music around, and I think this intro sounds nice and spacey enough to fit the theme. I actually wondered whether John Hopkins might be involved with this, as he was in the intro of Viva la Vida. I know those guys are still close friends, and it seems he was involved with this album in some ways, but not with this intro. Anyway, it sets things up pretty nicely, but the first true song on the album is the second track, which was the first single, Higher Power. And you know, I like this song. When I first heard it, I was reminded of upbeat 80s hits like Take On Me by a-ha. But with its atmospheric and detailed production, I was inclined to think this is something that Peter Gabriel would have approved of in the 80s. There's something retro-futuristic about the sound, like it's how people might have imagined pop music of the future to sound in the 80s. The song has a great energy and a really catchy melody. Certainly to the point where I'm sure if I had to hear it against my will too often, if I was being exposed to radio or something, I would definitely grow to hate it. But as it is, listening to it as part of the album, I enjoy it a whole lot, and it makes for a great opening song. Track 3, Humankind, opens in a similar style with a driving beat, and some unusual sounds that definitely get me intrigued. Once the song gets going though, it feels to me strangely messy, like they had several ideas for its direction but didn't quite pin it down. And unfortunately, I don't find the melody to be nearly as endearing as that of Higher Power. It just feels slightly underwritten to me. And the song ends with these stuttering synth sounds that sound pretty cool but don't really go anywhere. Track 4 is apparently called Alien Choir. It's labeled with an emoji of stars. And this is another spacey ambient interlude in the same vein as the first track. The sound of it reminds me of something like Steve Roach's Mystic Chords and Sacred Spaces. I'm honestly a sucker for these kind of sounds. I love it. I only wish this track were significantly longer so I could get more into the atmosphere. And of course, I'm hoping some of the following songs will continue this mood, even if it is in a more song-based format. It doesn't really happen though. Track 5 is a pretty generic ballad called Let Somebody Go that features guest vocals from Selena Gomez. Again, the keyboard sounds here make me think Peter Gabriel would approve, and maybe Don't Give Up from his So album was an inspiration for this duet. Like most of what we've heard so far, I do enjoy the production here, but the actual tune of this song is just vapid to me, I'm sorry to say. There's some pretty nice bass and piano stuff going on at the end of the track. But it's not really enough, and by this point I'm just hoping for something more interesting in the next track. And track 6 is called Human Heart, represented with a heart emoji. It features writing and vocals from We Are King and Jacob Collier, but despite featuring these really talented musicians, this song is shockingly uneventful. Human heart, night and day. It seems as though this affected a cappella is serving as an introduction for something more, but nope, it doesn't go anywhere. I was reminded of the A New Machine interludes from Pink Floyd's A Momentary Lapse of Reason. Those tracks are not popular with Floyd fans generally speaking, but I think at least they have some intensity to them, and they're only a minute or so long. But this song Human Heart, it has even less going on, and it's stretched out to 3 minutes. By this point, the momentum that the album had built up with the first couple of songs is completely evaporated. The next one, track 7, is called People of the Pride, and the intro of this song had me hopeful for something quite a bit more satisfying. Ooh, that sounds quite grand. But that intro is misleading to say the least, because this song ends up being some kind of boogie glam pop. What is this, Spirit in the Sky? It's pretty bizarre, and for me, it doesn't work. At least it's got some energy to it though, and in fact, this is probably the song that sounds most like a follow-up to Everyday Life. Probably not the side of Everyday Life I really wanted a follow-up to though. It does have a pretty nice middle 8 with good use of a horn section. But other than that, I think this is a pretty underwhelming attempt at something more rocking. Soon enough we'll be missing it though, because track 8, Beautiful, is quite a shocker to say the least. I really don't know what they were thinking when they decided to chipmunk Chris Martin's voice like that. It sounds awful though, and this is the point in the album where I went from cautiously optimistic to fully let down. The melody here is also very basic. It's like a children's song. You know, even without the horrible vocal effects, it's a pretty dull tune. But then the ridiculous sounds just make it near unbearable. Track 9 is a 20-second interlude of crowd noise and strange sounds. It's called Music of the Spheres 2, or a Planet Earth emoji. Anyway, track 10 is hugely successful third single My Universe, featuring vocals from K-pop superstars BTS. And you know, when I first heard this song as a single, I was kind of disappointed by it after what I'd heard with Coloratura. But in the context of the album, it feels like quite a relief after the last few tracks. As with Higher Power, I'm sure if I heard this song on the radio enough, I would easily tire of it, but it is a well-written tune. BTS sound really good, they honestly sound more at home on it than Chris Martin does. It's an uplifting song. Not too much to it, but for what it is, it does it well. Track 11 is the last emoji song. It's titled Infinity Sign, and this track has a pretty different vibe compared to what's come before. I kind of forgot I was listening to Coldplay for a second then. It does, however, carry over some of the retro-futuristic feelings I was getting earlier in the album. You know, it sounds like music of the future in the past. It's pretty cool. I think it's just a shame they didn't make an actual song out of it instead of what is essentially a long interlude. But yeah, definitely one of the more satisfying of the slightly more abstract tracks on this album. And that just leaves us with track 12, the indisputable centerpiece of the album, the 10-minute epic, Coloratura. And you know, I think we were all hoping that this song was going to be more representative of the album than it turned out to be. As it is, it honestly feels so out of place in how high quality the composition and arrangements are. When I first heard this one as a single, I was really impressed by its grandiosity and moved by its sentiments. Although I did feel the less than dynamic production could have been more flattering. In the context of the album though, it sounds wonderful, and you honestly couldn't ask for a more satisfying closing track. It seems to be getting a lot of comparisons to Pink Floyd, and you can certainly feel that in its grandiosity and ambition. The piano-led sentimentality of it though is perhaps better compared to the 70s work of Supertramp. See Fool's Overture from their Even in the Quietest Moments album. Some of the melodies and guitar parts here even seem to me to call back to Coldplay's earliest material though, and that makes the song feel particularly special, I think. It feels almost like a culmination of everything Coldplay has aimed for across their whole career. In that way, I'm inclined to say that Coloratura is like Coldplay's A Day in the Life, you know, in that it seems to have a bit of everything they do well. It's just a shame that the rest of the album really can't even compare to what Coldplay achieved on this song. I went into this album pretty intrigued by the overall concept they were presenting, and of course enticed by the ambitious songwriting of Coloratura. I wondered if perhaps Higher Power would serve as the album's radio single, and the rest of the album might be more progressive or at least artful in its approach. And while I did enjoy the aesthetic in general and the sound of the interludes in particular, the bulk of the songs here unfortunately ended up missing the mark for me, both in the absence of interesting ideas and in the lack of strong songwriting. So for me, I don't feel it really works as a pop album nor as an art rock album. The singles are undoubtedly strong tracks, and Coloratura is a beautiful piece of music, but the remaining songs range from mediocre to flat out baffling and unlistenable. It's a very uneven album. Hopefully fans will enjoy it for its strengths, but unfortunately it leaves me with the feeling that it could have been so much more. So if you'd like to join me and our community to chat about this album and other music, you can join us over on the Jonny Khatru Discord. You can find a link to our Discord server in the description. All the clips in this video of my first listen to this album are from my live stream over on Twitch. If you'd like to join us for listening parties to listen to more full albums, follow me over there at twitch.tv/JonnyKhatru. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider supporting me with the link in the description to buy me a coffee. It really helps me to be able to keep making these videos and keep my channel going, so I really appreciate it. And thank you very much for watching. Until next time, take it easy.